This lesson is an extract taken from my new book entitled The Greatest Drum Beats and Drum Grooves of All Time, which you can now download from my website. You can find a link at the bottom of this video. This lesson in particular will be looking at the drum groove from the song Scentless Apprentice by Nirvana, drummed by Dave Grohl, of course. Absolute stonking beat. It occurs during the verses and at the beginning of the song, and requires some serious bass drum technique, single foot bass drum technique. You can of course play this with a double bass drum pedal if you wish, but eventually you should be able to get your single foot up to these kind of speeds. Although to play it with the power and precision that Dave does play does require a little bit of practice, but all those things come in time. So the first thing to understand is that there's 4 beats to the bar, so we're counting 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and even though we'll be counting some 16th notes in between those, which I'll explain to you in a second. And Dave is playing 8th notes on the half open hi-hat all the way through. So the right hand is playing 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and on the half open hi-hat. There's a crash cymbal at the beginning of each bar as well on beat 1. So we've also got a snare drum backbeat supplied on beats 2 and 4 of the bar at the same time as the hi-hat. So the hands, the basic pattern of doing this, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Let's put the bass drums in at the beginning as well. We've got bass drums on 1 and the and of beat 1 at the same time as the hi-hats. And remember the crash cymbal was on beat 1 as well. So far we've got this. 1 that. Then we've also got a flam which falls in between the hi-hats on the and of 2 and beat 3. Now 16th notes are counted using this rather weird sounding system, 1 eander, 2 eander, 3 eander, 4 eander, which if you've watched my past videos or seen elsewhere online or in drum books you'd have heard a million times before. It's a very common way of counting 16th notes. And this flam falls on the of beat 2, the little a, in between the hi-hats on the and of 2 and beat 3. And the flam is just simply 2 notes played very close together, but not quite at the same time. So I like to play this as a left-handed flam, so my right hand comes down first, left hand comes down second, louder. I'm not sure if you can hear that on this recording, but both my hands are coming down at the snare drum at the same time. I think I'm only hearing 1 note in my headphones, but there's actually 2 notes coming down there at the same time. So in order to play this properly, we've got to keep this hi-hat going and drop in this flam in between the hi-hats and then get back up to the hi-hat for beat 3. So just for beat 2 of the bar, we've got 2 and 3, 2 and 3. The hi-hat's keeping steady and we're just going to drop in the flam in between. Back up to the hi-hat after the flam. So far, with the flam included, we've got this. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and... So the next thing is to add in the bass drums, the rather tricky bass drums, the 4 in a row that occur later on. But before we get to that bit, we've got a bass drum, after the snare drum on beat 2, in between the hi-hats on 2 and and, so on the E of 2. So we've got to play 2 E and, 2 E and, followed by the flam afterwards. 2 E and 3, 2 E and 3. So that bass drum falls in between the hi-hats on 2 and after the snare drum. So 1 and 2 E and 3. That's the first half of the bar. 1 and 2 E and 3. Then we've got 4 bass drums in a row. Falling on 3, the E, the and the of beat 3. And the hi-hat's going to come down with 2 of those bass drums on the 3 and the and. So beat 3 consists of this, 3 E and And I'm using my left bass drum foot for this because that's actually how I play, so please don't get confused by that. I'm using my left bass drum foot on this right-handed kit. I won't explain why, it's too weird and complicated. But no, just to let you know that's why I'm using my left foot for this. 2 E and 2 E and 2 E and The tempo of the song, so those 4 notes in a row, we got to play that sort of tempo. So up to beat 4 of the bar now, we've got 1 and 2 E and 3 E and 4, 1 and 2 E and 3 E and 4. Again, just notice how those notes that fall in between the hi-hats fall exactly in between the hi-hats. This hi-hat's keeping steady. I'm using it as a reference point, so my notes go in between nice and smoothly in between exactly. So with the bass drum on, the E of 2 falls exactly in between the hi-hats, and the flam as well falls exactly in between the hi-hats. Beat 4, we've got a bass drum on the E of beat 4 after the snare drum, just like we had on beat 2, the E of beat 2. Again, falls in between the hi-hats. 4 E and then another bass drum on the of beat 4, in between the hi-hats, the very last note of the bar, in between the hi-hat on the and then the crash cymbal on beat 1, we've got a bass drum. So beat 4, the whole of beat 4, 4 E and 4 E and Now remember, when you loop this bar round, you've actually got 2 bass drums in a row, because the of beat 4 comes just before beat 1. So we've got to be able to play a 1. Remember, it comes down with the crash cymbal on beat 1. So even though it's 1 bass drum at the end of the bar, when you loop it, it's a 1, 2 bass drums in a row. So from beat 4 to beat 1, 4 E and a 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 1. So let me now play the whole bar for you nice and slowly. 1 and 2 E and 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 and 2 E and 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 and 2 E and 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 and 2 E and 3 E and a 4 E and a 1. Bit faster now. So missed out the hi-hat on the and there. Let's try and do that again for you. 1 up to speed now. And as you can see, that flam on the of 2 is particularly tricky to throw in time. Coming down to the snare drum with both hands, back up to the hi-hat on the 3, so that it sounds like that hi-hat is uninterrupted, because it's constant all the way through. The hi-hat doesn't change, the 8th notes don't change. We throw in that flam in between, get back up to the hi-hat, so that pulses go all the way through the bar. Of course, followed by 4 bass drums in a row makes it also particularly tricky. So there's different techniques you can use for your bass drum foot, which are discussed in other videos I do. But the tempo of the song isn't so fast that that you require some super duper bass drum technique in order to play that fast. You know, you can just use the full leg. That was not very good. I prefer to use a bit of ankle technique when I play that, but those examples then, I'm just using my full leg. Not particularly comfortable, but at least I'm getting the notes out. And it will suffice until, for example, you might pick up a bit more technique. Just using the full leg will get you through. But there are other techniques you can learn to develop bass drum foot technique and speed. But if you just have a go at it and blast your way through, over time your bass drum foot finds a way. I mean, I managed to find a way to play this years ago, before I was officially trained, before I learned any sort of technique, and I just used my full leg and it worked for me. So have a go with that, have fun with it, and I'll see you next time.